Disney Plus brings movies, shows, nostalgia, and joy right to your screen. This podcast brings reactions, recaps, discussions, and interviews right to your mouse ears. Scott Murray, Regina Davis, and Nathan Chick are here to enhance your Disney Plus experience and take your Disney fandom to a new level. Welcome to the Disney Plus Streamcast.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the Disney Plus Streamcast. I'm Scott Murray, and I'm here with Regina Davis.
Hello, Happy New Year, Scott.
Happy New Year to you. How was the end of the year? How was Christmas and the holidays for you and the fam?
It was very good. It was very fun. I always sort of dread the holidays as they come because I sort of procrastinate a little bit, but I always clutch it in the end and end up having a really great time. But then whenever the holidays end and the new year starts, I'm always pretty glad that it's over. So I'm pretty satisfied right now.
Is there something that you got for Christmas that's geek related that really stands out to you right now?
A lot of my stuff this year was actually more bird related.
Oh, okay.
Than geek related.
Well, you're a bird, but you're a bird geek.
Oh, yes, for sure. I got a book about pigeons. I got a mug with pigeons on it. I got a stuffed animal pigeon and all kinds of stuff. I think probably the geekiest thing I ended up getting was I noticed that my younger brother had gotten a new keyboard for Christmas, and I remembered that I had purchased him a gaming keyboard a couple years earlier, so I reclaimed that and have now absorbed it back to my home. And so I've got a nice little Magic Eagle gaming keyboard that I'm very happy with.
Nice. Speaking of that, as you know, because I've heard you kind of chuckle at me occasionally during recordings, or actually before recordings, when you could hear the wheel on my mouse go click, 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 click
Yes.
every time I moved it, and that's because at one point in time, the podcast mic collapsed and landed right on top of it, so it jacked up the little wheel on the mouse. So every time I would roll it, you could hear it clicking. Well, I put a new gaming mouse on my Christmas list, and that came through. Santa came through on
what
that.
What kind?
It is a UTech Smart Venus. The other thing that stands out to me is Jen got me the Fallen Order game.
Oh, yeah. Have you played it yet?
I've started it. Yeah, it's very challenging, which is a good thing. The only other thing I can think of off the top of my head is I got the retro Kenner Return of the Jedi skiff, Tatooine skiff. So my plan is to put that together and then collect some of the figures that are seen on the box and put those on there too. That was very appropriate because Return of the Jedi is still my favorite. And the sail barge scene is the most memorable scene for me as a kid because I thought there was no way out. And when I saw Luke Skywalker light up that green lightsaber and whip everybody, I was just going crazy. So that was a great moment.
My God.
And that's very apropos because I would say that today's episode is pretty much all about Star Wars. Later on in the show, we are going to talk about Episode 9. Now, granted, we know that Episode 9 is not on Disney Plus yet, but it is relevant because it will be at some point in time. It is Star Wars. And, of course, they released the second to the last episode of The Mandalorian just in time for the release of The Rise of Skywalker. And, of course, I think we know why that is, because we got to see Baby Yoda use the healing powers of the Force, and then we saw Rey do that in Episode 9. So we're going to talk about reactions to that, and then we're going to close the show by talking about the finale of The Mandalorian, which by the time that thing was over, everybody had had their reactions to any number of things that they saw. So that's coming up, but before we do that, we have to get news. So what time is it now, Regina?
It's time for News with Nathan.
Hello, folks. How you doing out there?
Hey, Nathan. How's it going?
Oh, I had a cracking Christmas, a fantastic New Year.
Good.
Something happened this morning to really take the shine off of that. But
Oh, no.
we'll have a chat about that later on, won't we?
So I have to assume, I had asked Regina about geeky things she might have gotten for Christmas. Knowing that you are the collector that you are, I have to think
Indeed.
somebody got you something that stands out in your mind right now.
Yes. And I wish they were pertinent to what we're talking about today.
That's okay.
Sadly not, but I got myself, because those are the best presents, I got myself a new Mass Effect decal for my laptop.
Okay.
A Normandy SR2 mug, also from Mass Effect, for my coffee in the morning. And I left myself under the tree the giant Overwatch Watchpoint Gibraltar Lego thingy, because I found it on sale at Walmart for $54.
Nice.
And so, I had a great Christmas. It was the best, because, who knows what you like better than yourself?
Exactly.
That's right.
Right. Bang on. So, I got everything I wanted and then some. So, lovely.
Awesome.
Do you guys have a good one?
We
Oh,
did.
yeah.
Sweet. You know who else had a good one? Disney had a good one. Segueing straight in there. Frozen 2, most successful animated movie of all time. 1.32 billion. That's a lot of Disney bucks to be counting. Well done, you, Bob Iger. Also, 24 million subscribers we're talking for Disney Plus by the end of the year. That was fantastic. They had to like that. The Wall Street Bods said that even with the Verizon free year offer, Disney Plus would probably top out less than 20 million subscribers for the first year. 24 million is the predicted number at the end of 2019, as well as causing a whole bunch of attrition to other streaming services like Netflix. So again, those guys in the old brain trust at Disney have to be super jazzed about that. We had some fantastic content last year, which we'll be talking about later on, of course, because for me, it doesn't get any better than The Mandalorian. But in 2020, there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff still to come. So never mind all the vaulted stuff, but as well as, obviously, more Mandalorian. February 17th sees Season 7 of The Clone Wars, which if you love that Dave Filoni stuff, it starts there with that one, guys. You're going to like that. But something else that came out over the Christmas break was that WandaVision has been bumped up as well. That's going to come out in 2020 as well. How excited are we for that?
Very.
Super excited. And I think that's smart, because they're realizing, like, oh, we need to really be, following up The Mandalorian with some really good content. We can't just have people go through a dry spell. So I think they're really managing their timeline well, and I'm hyped.
Yeah, we know that from previous comments by Kevin Feige, that WandaVision is going to lead into the new Doctor Strange movie. And he made a couple of remarks about that over the Christmas break when he did a Q&A session at the New York Film Academy. A student asked Feige about the process that goes into choosing the characters that the studios use and how that affects the future storylines. And Feige said, quoting, "Sometimes you're choosing the title hero. You're choosing which main character or main team you want to bring to the screen. And oftentimes, as you're making and developing the movie, who will come into it and who will fit into it. The next Doctor Strange film, for instance, features some new MCU characters that would be making their debut in that movie that you won't expect or won't guess who it is. But we have found a cool way to make it work. Because we wanted to make a particular type of movie there, and there was a character we always wanted to do something with who we think will fit in really well there. So, he's dropping hints. Not enough to give anything away, but oh my gosh. Between WandaVision and, the promise of something new for Doctor Strange 2, which as we know is already going to have like a different vibe to it. It's going to have that horror vibe. Again, just excited for the new content. The churn never stops, but oh my gosh, we're so glad of it. And what a fantastic and exciting time to be a Disney Plus subscriber if you're into the MCU, especially because, before that hit, you still got Falcon and Winter Soldier. Oh my word.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, because you've got The Mandalorian Season 2, you've got WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier. As we said, Scott will be in Hog Heaven because Muppets Now is coming out.
That is true.
You know it. There's the Phineas and Ferb movie, the second season of High School Musical. Diary of a Future President, which people are already saying is like a cross-generational sort of spanning show that people are going to love, whoever watches it. Lizzie McGuire gets the reboot, which I'm not there for it, but I know you got your eye on that one, Regina. And
Oh,
never
yeah.
mind, there you go. And something I'm psyched for as well is Walt Disney Animation Studios, much in the same way as Pixar gets to do Spark Shorts, they've got their short show coming out, Short Circuit, with all their experimental films. I guess my favorite bits of the old Walt Disney Animation, the previews and all the stuff that they show before the movies, when they do the shorts, that's the stuff that gets me jazzed, because it's just the right amount of quality and content, and it just gets you salivated for like the main course, like the proper movie. And in some ways, as I say, bang for buck, I enjoy that more. So again, just super hyped for that. That's going to be great. While we're talking about people who are super hyped, let's flip it and talk about people who aren't super hyped at all. Michael Eisner came out over New Year talking trash about episode 9. He's not the only one, but he's notable because he is the former CEO of Disney, and there were lots of cool things done under his watch, although perhaps not as much as has been done under Bob Iger's watch. But he tweeted the other day, "The Rise of Skywalker is an acceptable film. A lot of story and fan delights, but somewhat emotionless, while The Mandalorian on Disney Plus establishes show creator Jon Favreau as the new George Lucas, which Robert Iger had the foresight to declare." The follow-up tweet said, "Daisy Ridley played Rey throughout the film with one expression, all/fear, until the very end of the film when she reveals her name. That's what I meant by a film that somewhat lacked emotion." Ouch.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking about that in a little bit.
I mean, oh man.
Painful one.
I do think it's important to consider that if that's what he came away with, there's not, as far as Rey's concerned, I mean, what did Yoda say was the path to the dark side? Fear. And one of the main things that Rey struggles with, as we saw in that movie, is a potential path to the dark side for more than one reason.
Yeah.
So, you know, if that's what he saw, it may not be all that disconnected as he may think. So, and that, you know what, and I'll say that too about The Rise of Skywalker, and I know we're going to talk about what we thought about it, but for all the hand-wringing that goes online when people start getting into it, and then all that crap about who's a real Star Wars fan if you like this or believe in that, I mean, I just tune that stuff out. It is so absurd. Because you can find, you know, whether you liked it or not, you can find some really good, well-written articles online explaining things that you think haven't been explained. Including, in this case, I saw a very in-depth article on Sci-Fi on how the resurrection of Palpatine worked and how many different places and points in not only the films, but the animated series and books and everything that explain everything. Or at least gives it some background as to how that happened and how he got there and how he was always trying to get there. So, you know, that's just one example of many things. So when I see people, and it's not that you can't say you don't like it, but I caution people at times to say something doesn't connect because, you know, we all live busy lives, or a lot of us do. And it's perhaps we missed something, or we forgot about something, or we didn't read something. You never know where some of these references are going to come from. So,
well, something else that set the old Twitterverse and the old Redditors alight this week was Dominic Monaghan as well, in the Hollywood Reporter, alluding to the fact that there was a lot of footage left on the cutting room floor, and asking if would they be so lucky as to see a J.J. Abrams cut of that movie at some point in the future. Both Kelly Marie Tran and the co-writer Chris Terrio as well also said there's so much that wasn't included that if some of that could resurface, it might be a good thing.
I agree. I'd be very interested to see what that is.
Yeah, apparently one of those scenes includes more exposition or more explanation on how Palpatine did what he did. You know, then there was the whole confusion. I think one of the things that I remember seeing was the confusion about, you know, the woman, oh shoot, I can't remember the character's name, the African-American woman who was one of the lead warriors there at the end.
Jana?
Yeah, and her connection to Lando. You know, apparently, I guess that's Lando's daughter. You know, and there was rumor that she was going to be Lando's daughter. And then there's a nudge, nudge, wink, wink moment in the film that made you go, huh? And apparently that was also explained in more detail in stuff that got cut out. Her connection to Lando. gosh, they're always so hesitant to release those longer cuts of things. Apparently Phantom Menace, the original cut's like 5 hours or something, or 8 hours or something crazy like that. What ends up happening is, they release the Blu-ray and those becomes deleted scenes. And they do that instead of giving you a full cut of the film.
Well, it's enough to drive you to drink. And if you were going to partake of a libation this holiday season, and indeed this new year, might I suggest the child beverage, which is being served off menu at the old Trader Sam's Grog Grotto in the Polynesian Village in Walt Disney World, or indeed a Trader Sam's Enchanted Tiki Bar at Disneyland Hotel. It's a green cocktail served in a martini glass. It's got 2 blueberries kind of floating on the inside up against the glass to look like eyes. It's got lime wedges on either side to look like ears, and it comes wrapped in a napkin as if it were a little robe. It's got notes of pineapple and coconut. It's pretty tropical, but apparently it's not too sweet. And a few of those, you won't worry about any of that. And that's all I've got this week, folks.
You know what's the best thing about that? Is you can get that right now instead of pre-ordering it and not getting your drink until May.
God bless.
Oh, well, if you're a Star Wars fan, I think you're really going to enjoy today's episode, because the rest of the show is completely dedicated to Star Wars, because up next, we're going to talk about Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and then we're going to close the show with the close of Season 1 of The Mandalorian.
That's next on the Disney Plus Streamcast.
I think it was a really good idea to wait until the new year and our first episode back to discuss Episode 9. I know the popular thing to do in podcasts, obviously, is, after you go see it, you got to make that episode right away. We've done that sort of thing before, but we also thought in this case, since we were going to have to take this break anyway, there was a benefit to it, because we'll let everybody else talk about it first. And then people can come check out what we're talking about. But it also gave everybody a chance to see it. And I've actually got friends on Facebook who are going for the 6th, 7th, and 8th time. So there's been plenty of time to see it between the release date and now. If you listen to our last episode, we kind of set the stage for this, despite the fact we weren't going to review it in December. We showed how I was not the biggest fan of Episode 8. One of my biggest problems with 8, among other things, was I don't feel like it connected to 7 real well at all. I am a Star Wars fan. There are some things I like more than others, but nothing ruins my childhood. You don't hear me say things like that. Nathan is a big fan of the original trilogy, and for all intents and purposes, that kind of is where it begins and ends. Regina, if I remember right, has seen everything, has liked most things, didn't dislike 8 as much as I did. So we're really coming from different places here as we went in to see Episode 9. And since Episode 8 for me was so disappointing, it's the only Star Wars movie I don't own. That's how much I was disappointed in 8. And I still have problems with 8. It still frustrates me. And I thought a lot about that as I watched the reactions from Episode 9, because when I look at some of the things that people are complaining about regarding decisions and regarding connecting the story and things, I actually think that part of those problems stem from the fact that JJ did 7, Ryan did 8, JJ did 9. I don't believe for a second that, if JJ had decided to do 8, we would have gotten the same story. At the same time, I think Lucasfilm was trying to do something unique because some fans complained after 7 that it was too much like Episode 4, so they gave them something different, and then nobody liked what they did different. So, it was really a turbulent journey in a lot of ways. But there are still people that like all 3, and then everybody's got opinions about the sequel trilogy. For me, I know we all want to kind of dive into some details, so I'll just keep mine simple so we can kind of get your just initial reaction. Since I felt that way about 8, I just went in to just watch 9. I didn't have really any expectation. I just hoped that I got something out of it. I felt good about it in some way. I do not think the movie is perfect. It felt like the pacing was slower in the first half of the movie for me, and then it picks up a little more. It did feel a tad long. That's why it's interesting to be talking about an extended cut, because I felt like the pacing was a little slow for me, but I was engaged in it. I don't think I ever got bored, whereas in Episode 8, by the time they went to the casino planet, I was noticing I was getting bored. The best way I would describe it is I find it to be a satisfying end. I'm not saying it's awesome. I'm not saying it's great. I'm not saying it's awful. Considering what had to be done, not only kind of patching up some things that, JJ or whoever may or may not have liked about 8, because you can tell there were some things that kind of tweaked what 8 did, almost turned it completely around. Between having to do that and connect those 3 stories and connect all 9 and finish the entire saga with all that on their plate, I think it was a satisfying end to the saga as a whole. There were some things I enjoyed. Is there a lot of fan service? Yes, there is. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. Because again, they didn't do it as much in 8, and there are people mad about that. You can't please all the people all the time. But when you're ending the saga, I think you have to have those fan moments, those callbacks, because it's the end of the saga, and it all kind of connects together. I did appreciate a lot of the fan service. But overall, before we get into like things we liked and didn't like specifically, that's how I would leave it. I would just say it's a satisfying end to the saga. Back when I reviewed movies, I always gave things a grade because you could still give something an A, and it doesn't mean it's perfect. I would give Rise of Skywalker somewhere between a B and a B minus. Regina, what did you think?
I agree with you that it was a fitting closure. I didn't leave the theater just saying, throwing my hands up and being like, well, WTF, why is this, this way? But I felt a little bit yanked around getting there. Mm-hmm. The movie did not feel long to me at all. It felt like it sped by. And it sped by in a kind of a bizarre way. But the fan service that they offered, that a lot of people have been griping about, my friends in particular, I'm completely fine with, because like you said, this is the end of an era. This is a legacy being, put to a close, and there's certain things that people want to see, and they showed us that, and I think they did a lot of those moments beautifully. But there was also just a whole lot of head scratching for me. I didn't get bored at any point or anything like that, but there was, I think I may have actually said "what" out loud in the movie theater at one point.
Okay, I'm looking forward to getting to that when we get there.
Just little things like that. I thought the journey was a little bit bizarre, but I didn't leave the movie theater upset, and I am satisfied with the way it ended.
Nathan, I would think we've got 2 things happening here with you being an original trilogy fan, because this is trying to wrap up, that story included. So I almost wonder if in some cases your reaction to this comes in 2 parts. Being a huge fan of the original trilogy and not such a fan of the sequel trilogy or prequel trilogy. So I would think that your reaction is broken into one side, which is how it ends the saga, since the original trilogy started it all, and then just what you thought of it as the end of the sequel films.
Well, sir, when I woke up this morning to go and see it, because I wasn't rushing out, I wasn't super excited, and I had a lot of friends who, both camps, people who trashed it and people who've gone to see it like half a dozen times. I was quite genuinely looking forward to it because I heard there was a lot of fan service, and it says Star Wars on the box. If you don't get that, then it's not Star Wars. If you were going somewhere else not to get fans, you wanted fan service or you didn't want it, don't go here. It's a bloody Star Wars film, and it's the last one of all of them. That's all you were ever gonna get. When I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, cool. So how excited am I for this? Noted author J.J. Abrams, with his really satisfying climaxes to Lost and Star Trek and Cloverfield and Justice League and Batman vs. Superman writer Chris Terrio. What could go wrong? And it was exactly what I want, exactly what I thought I was going to get from it. I got some big old Michael Bay style set pieces, which I thought were kind of irrelevant. I got a whole bunch of moments. And yeah, at the end of it, I was just glad it was over. It really dragged for me. I didn't enjoy it. It felt contrary to the Star Wars that I grew up with. And it also felt very weird, very disjointed coming out off of episode 8, which I did rewatch beforehand. And I'm like, no, come on, guys. Like, surely somebody in the Lucasfilm story group is going to say, whoa. You got to connect these dots a little better, or better still, go back in time with a Pym particle and just like put a couple in Rian Johnson's head and stop him from making that film. I don't know what it is, but there are a few moments I enjoyed, but I felt that the tonal shift was just a bit weird in that in this one, it seemed that it was a bit too backslappy, a bit too much bonhomie, like now's the time we pick for Poe and Finn and those dudes to have a bit of character and a bit of personality and start kind of with the smart quips. And it just felt like it was a bit too layered on. Like, this is what Joss Whedon does in all his movies. Maybe we should do it for ours. And I also felt, to a degree, it was almost like there was like a fetishization of Princess Leia. Like, we've got this footage for Carrie Fisher, we should use it and we should do something really big with her. And I'm like, well, since when has she been a big part of it? I don't get it.
I felt that.
Yeah, I felt like they tried to shoehorn her into like everything that they did. Like, she was this big totem for the Alliance. And yeah, I kind of get it. I get that to a degree. But at the same time, it's not what the movie was about. It was about Rey. It was about Kylo Ren. That epic struggle, good and bad. And then you had, like, much as you had the original trilogy with the whole Han, Leia, and Luke, then you kind of had, Poe, Finn, and Rey. So why so much of it kind of contingent on what she does? I just thought it was kind of really weird to kind of retcon how important she was to, like, the Alliance and all that. It was very strange to me. Glad I watched it because now I get to talk to you guys about it. But my highlight was watching the Ewoks at the very end.
Yeah.
Yub nub.
It's such a tricky thing with Leia because, it almost made the whole decision to kill off Han and Luke even more difficult because then we lost Carrie Fisher for real. And the original plan for Episode 9 was that Leia was going to have a huge role in it. She was going to be a major part of it, and then all of a sudden we can't do it. And, we hate that couldn't happen every single day. Still hate that. And I do think that there was an element, and granted, yeah, it was a little strange because you could tell, how they made it work, but I'm just like you suspend disbelief. I'm willing to let that go because, that was just as much for Leia as it was Carrie. And I think, it wasn't something that ruined the story for me. But I think the bigger question is what did you think about Leia being central to Kylo Ren's redemption? The interesting idea of, right after, right when that showdown between Rey and Kylo Ren takes place, that it's Leia saying Ben that stops him for a split second. And of course, we know how that turned out. I think if I remember right, that's when Rey stabs him and then heals him. And then shortly thereafter that, you have the redo of Kylo and Han, which I thought was a kind of a nice moment, but an interesting moment because my brain was trying so hard to kind of maybe overthink that a little bit, as far as, okay, is this something that's just representing Kylo's redemption in a way that he regrets going the way he did, and now he's doing what his dad originally wanted him to do, which was turn away from this darkness when he throws the lightsaber into the water. I guess if that's what's happening there, I think that was kind of a cool moment, because I think it all hit us really hard when that happened to Han Solo in Episode 7. But what did you think about how Leia played a role? I mean, she basically said Ben died, and then Kylo turned.
I didn't love it, if I'm going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't land correctly for me. I thought, and like you mentioned, Nathan, like, there's a limited amount of footage that we have that we can use for these things, but I think it's just a little bit stupid that they decided to sort of have her use her last bit of the Force and her last bit of life to make a long distance call and just say Ben, and then that be what happens, because it's not like she hasn't really tried very hard to get him to realize that he needs to come back to the light, and that now it felt unceremonious, and it just felt like it wasn't enough, and it just felt a little bit silly, just kind of thrown around for me.
It's the equivalent of the Martha in Batman versus Superman, and it's what it is. I don't. Here's the thing why. What you said, Regina, like, why it didn't land for me is that there wasn't enough with Kylo Ren or Ben Solo and his parents in the preceding films to make me feel like he actually gave a rat's ass.
Well, except that moment here, and this is amazing that I'm bringing this up, because we know how I feel about 8, but he does hesitate when he's attacking the ship that she's on in 8. Whether or not he really wants to follow through the attack, right? Because he knows his mother's on it. There's just something about Leia that, with Han, he was a lot stronger and doing what Snoke had told him to do, or maybe what Palpatine was using Snoke to tell him to do, and not fall prey to what Vader had fallen to when it came to turning. But it always seemed like when it came to finishing off Leia, he hesitated a heck of a lot more there in 8 than he did with Han.
But we didn't really get that emotional moment or even any interplay between them to really suggest that he would feel that way. We're inferring a lot of that, and maybe that's what a great director does, is give you that shot and you're like, oh, that's what that means. Yeah, that's cool. But last time I checked, I was kind of a low intelligence, barely humanoid dork who loves Star Wars and has that all tied up with my emotional development. And so I feel like I needed a bit more than that. I want to see someone spurned. I want to see him it was never going to be Woody Allen. It was never going to be, David Mamet or anything like that. There was never going to be any major tete-a-tete, them going at each other and coming to some great big apotheosis and resolution and all the rest of it. That was never going to happen. But I would have liked something else to suggest that those words, or that word, was going to really, really shake him to his core and make him challenge the beliefs of the last decade and a half, 2 decades, or whatever it is. And again, I know why he did it. Tying up those ends and all the rest of it. How do you get from A to B? After you had to go through in episode 8, then cool, I get it. It just didn't make for satisfying watching, though, for me.
I get it. Well, and I think it's worth discussing. I think you can definitely have a discussion about that, because the other thing involved in there, too, is Kylo throughout the entire trilogy never seemed to be 100% invested in being the next Vader. Or he was always questioning, whether he could be as good or better than Vader. Rey points that out to him in Episode 7. She can feel that in him. And then, of course, his connection with Rey. I mean, he's been back and forth. I mean, one minute, he's trying to hunt her down. The next minute, he's slicing Snoke in half and helping her fight off a bunch of guards. So I think it's not just Leia. It's also his constant conflict, too. Not to mention, this is all happening while he is, unlike his grandfather, unlike Vader, who rose to power as everything just fell into place perfectly for the Empire. This was the remnants of the Empire trying to rebuild itself again and trying to shape him into being as good as his grandfather. So there was all kinds of factors of why he was never, able to go full-on evil 24/7 and be everything that he thought he could be, and why he was constantly struggling. So I think there's a lot of things you can have a discussion about regarding what could pull Kylo one way or the other. We mentioned 8. So I like the fact, after being disappointed with what they did with Luke in 8, that that JJ wrote Luke a line where Luke said, "I was wrong." I did appreciate that, because, it did bother me a lot. And apparently it bothered Mark Hamill too. So I was happy to see that. And I also did love the moment where he raced the X-Wing out of the water. And then, of course, the other kind of thing that turned around 180 degrees from episode 8 was your parents are nobody, and your lineage is nobody. And then we find that your lineage is to Palpatine. And that, I thought, was an interesting route. I know some people actually guessed that. Of course, there were guesses of everybody. I mean, you just go down the litany of Star Wars names, and it's like, oh, she's related to Kenobi, she's related to Skywalker, she's related to Palpatine. That was an interesting way to go, but I think it made the return of Emperor Palpatine have a little more gravitas, obviously, in this. It gave that a little more purpose. But it's still an interesting choice. And I actually saw somebody who was mad, just furious about her being a Palpatine, because in their mind, making her have a lineage like that made her powers be more his than hers. That was the viewpoint. Instead of it literally being her genuine power, it made it his that she has. And I don't know that I agree with that, because that's like saying that if I'm LeBron James's kid and I have great basketball skills, it's not my skills, it's my dad's. And I don't think that's the way that works, and I don't think that's the way that works here. Plus, that kind of devalues the Skywalkers that have all had those powers as well. So what did you all think about those changes, especially, going, from, oh, your parents are nobody, and, and that just kind of ended the whole, where did she come from, to, oh, I was lying, and, oh, by the way, you've got Palpatine in your family.
So I disagree with the person that was very, very upset. Just because I agree with you, this is not the first time we've had a good character descended from someone deeply rooted in the dark side. That's not territory we're unfamiliar with. But I will say I did find it a little bit more appealing that her parents were really nobodies. Because, whenever I was watching the movie and Palpatine says that line, and it was something sort of like, oh, she's more than she claims to be. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, is she a Palpatine? And then I was like, no, there's no way. And then she's firing on that ship. She's sort of, and then that Force lightning happens, and I was like, uh-oh, she might be a Palpatine.
She might be.
Yep. And then, the movie goes forward, and lo and behold, she's a Palpatine. Whatever. That it works. I'm fine with it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I thought it would have been cooler if they had been able to make something out of her parents are nobodies, but she's still capable of all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Kind of an angle, but whatever.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed that bit as much as I could enjoy that movie. In that it very much reminded me of the whole from a certain point of view. The Ben Kenobi stuff when he's talking about, in the original trilogy, how Darth Vader, killed your father and all the rest of it, and then it comes out, oh, but you told me this, from a certain point of view, and they are nobodies in the scheme of things, but go back, compared to whoever they came from, not so much, and that bit, I had no problem with it. I wish I didn't know Palpatine was in the movie. I wish that had been a reveal. Mm-hmm. I think just to kind of counter the whole killing of Han Solo in Episode 7, if midway through Episode 9, it's like, but wait, there's Palpatine, And but wait, you're my granddaughter, and like, oh my god, like I don't know, I think I would have just popped for that in a really big way. Um, because fan service when done right is just great, and Star Wars fan, obviously all about the fan service, and I just felt like it would have given it a bit more punch. It was kind of cool to see that Force lightning thing. That was neat. To your point about devaluing it a little bit, I feel like the second you give Leia really awesome Force powers, you have devalued it a little bit, because obviously Luke had the benefit of one of the greatest Jedi of all time training him, and he got to whatever plateau or whatever level, but then the next thing you know, his sister's like floating through space like it ain't no thing, and communicating across the cosmos to turn her son into a good guy again. So as far as Force powers go, the use of the Force in this movie, I can say it was a little bit problematic. I've got no problem with like plot armor and space physics. I mean, that's cool, but it just felt that the Force kind of got them out of a bind more than once in this movie, with finding out where people are or magically appearing lightsabers and things like that. And it's like, oh, come on, mate, really? Again with that? So if someone said to me, yeah, it did take the edge off it a bit, no more than already had been done. I feel like they've already done the damage with that, with the whole Luke and Leia thing.
To the point about the Force, do you think, and by the way, it'll be really interesting to see what Disney does next with these characters, because I get the impression they're not done with them. And one of the things that has people talking is Finn. It seems to me he's got Force sensitivity. He knew when certain things were happening, and he picked it up in his mind. And here's the other thing. He's a stormtrooper that actually hits things when he fires a shot. I mean, and he is dead on. He is a dead-eye shot. I mean, you watch him in even Episode 7, he's a former stormtrooper that worked maintenance, for heaven's sakes, and he's a dead-on shot. And then, of course, he had to take on Kylo Ren with no saber skills, but managed to hold his own. And I'm wondering, when it came time for him to say, Rey, I wanted to tell you something, everybody just assumed it was, something romantic. And actually, John Boyega hit Twitter and said, no, that's not what it was. So I'm almost wondering if there was something to that. If he was going to say something about sensing her, knowing when she was in danger, knowing, some of the things we saw him pick up on, or just ask her about Force sensitivity. And I have a couple of friends who wonder, if that's going to be something that they run with in future stories, if they're going to keep these characters going.
You're right about that, Scott. It was actually confirmed. J.J. Abrams, at a fan Q&A for the Academy of Motion Picture and Arts, he actually answered that question and said that was the thing that Finn was trying to tell Rey, and what he was alluding to the whole time.
Oh,
with
really?
Flashback moments. So, yeah, can confirm.
Nice. Well, there you go. And it's so funny because I remember thinking that in 7. It's like, man, for a stormtrooper, he sure does manage to hit things.
Yeah.
Remember, those 2 scout troopers in The Mandalorian couldn't hit a tin can. So, so this guy's a dead shot. We only have a couple more minutes here to talk about that. Couple of quick things, and I'll let you guys close any more thoughts that you have. I thought the kiss was weird.
Yeah.
Really strange. I think it might have been JJ, said, well, it was just kind of a heat of the moment thing. Yeah, that was weird. I think, and I wondered, Regina, when you said there was a moment that you said, what? I wondered if that was it. Because that's when I said, huh? During the kiss. And the only other thing that I will share with our audience is Babu Fink. The little creature that does all the things with the droids, the little cute little creature that helped 3PO erase his memory and figure out what the Sith transmission was, or the Sith messages were. That was voiced by the actress that played Moaning Myrtle.
Oh.
In Harry Potter.
Huh.
Huh.
Yeah. So there you go. So closing thoughts on Episode 9.
So my what that I said in the movie theater, it wasn't over the kiss, although my eyes did roll back into my head so far that I thought I was going to choke on them. And that actually happened twice. The second time I almost choked on my own eyeballs was when the movie ended and she said, "I'm Rey Skywalker." And I'm so sorry. I understand what they were going for, but as soon as she started to say it, I was like, "Don't say it." And it just seemed really dumb to me. But the time when I said what was when it was revealed that there was just a jar of Snokes and one was just kind of floating upside down, and I just thought it was one of the goofiest things I'd ever seen. Also, when Rey, it was after the fight with Kylo Ren on the water, and then all of a sudden Rey is back on the island and has crashed the ship, is burning it, and just decides to toss her lightsaber in there all of a sudden, and then you see the Force ghosted hand of Luke Skywalker catch it. I think I may have actually chuckled openly in the theater at one point. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I knew you weren't going to like that.
No, because it's one of the few great things I've seen Luke get to do in the last 2 or 3 hours of the story.
Dude. Oh, man. I'm so sorry. It was so goofy. The thing I think I was most bitter about was that I really thought I was going to get a lot more Knights of Ren in this movie. And they really just kind of were following people around and peeking around corners and going, well, she's not here. And then they basically just kind of fought their boss in his pajamas there at the very end. Yep. I was a little bit miffed by that. But it was good enough. That's what I'll say. It was good enough.
And I have to say, I loved watching Lando come back. You have to say something about Lando. It was great to have Billy D. Williams there. And, for that guy to be able to come back and do some of the things he did, it was cool to see Lando back. I really did enjoy that a lot. I mean, they even managed to fit Wedge in, who I think up to that point had refused to be part of this. They managed to get him to come in there and do one quick thing, and that was kind of neat too. So
that was really cool. Dennis Lawson, absolutely. My biggest issue with that is just the amount of that movie was the amount of unused stuff. And I had talked about this before in the news section one time, that, this trilogy of movies has seen some really badass toys, some amazing character designs, some fantastic spaceship designs, or starship, I don't know, I'm a child of the 80s, so spaceships, but they don't get used, or they get cut out and they're only in it for a minute. So Knights of Ren, they have a crazy awesome backstory. There's a new Marvel series about those guys coming out. They all have their own weapons that they're proficient with, but you wouldn't know it. They're a bunch of schmucks standing on top of a rock looking around like
not
a desert.
finding anything.
Not finding anything.
Don't you
he's
think
not over here, boys?
Don't you think that's a result because they took such a weird turn in 8? I just feel like, because that was the thing that I had an issue with 8, was after there looked like there were so many things they were teeing up in 7. And then 8, I mean, one of the nice things about 9 was everybody got to get together and do something again. Everybody was separated practically through most of 8, and then it was a slow chase in space through most of it. And I think if JJ, and I understand people listening that like 8, and that's fine. I'm just talking about me here. I think that was the issue. I think if JJ had done 8, and of course it's JJ's fault. He said he didn't want to do it, so, and Ryan did. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I mean, he could, if he didn't get to do everything he wanted to do and had to shove it all into this film, I mean, that's part of his doing. But I think if he would have gotten to do 8, I don't know that the Knights of Ren would have turned into that, because, of course, that was one of many questions I had after 8 was over. And it was all because it was tied to 7. I was thinking, well, what about when they reference this? What about when they reference this? What about, when everybody kind of looked at Rey kind of weird because they you almost sensed like they knew where she came from but didn't want to share. I think that's one of the reasons why that's what I said in the beginning, why some of the things seemed kind of to be piecemealed in, was because, those were things he probably had in his mind or thought that the story would go, but he didn't do 8. And 8 just was very, very different. And it made for 9 to be what it is.
But Scott, I've got to say, he had an executive producing credit on 8, which probably doesn't mean a lot. It's probably just there for some points off the box office for his paycheck or something. But nevertheless, when it came to writing 7, he did. And that would have had to been cleared through. And I know it's a collaborative thing with that particular franchise. You know, it has to go through Lucasfilm Story Group. It has to go through Kathleen Kennedy. Someone signed off on that and said, no, this is good. We should do this. Mm-hmm. And at some point when Rian Johnson turned in that script and with that story and said, we're doing this, it must have got back to him, or it must have gone through Kathleen Kennedy. And she said, yeah, whatever, we should do this. This is great. And when I watch episode 9, I don't want an apology for episode 8. I just want a good movie. And it felt like it was an apology. It kind of make it up to the fans a certain way. And there's loads of bits that I don't need explained. All those Star Destroyers in Exegor, who's crewing them? I don't care. Yeah. I don't care how many billions of clones it takes to do that. Space magic. I'll just blame it on space magic. The same way I did Palpatine coming back, the same way I did that magic lightsaber thing. All of it. Space magic. It's fine. It's Star Wars. I don't really care.
Well, they obviously suck if they can't get out of there without navigation beacons, and everybody else seems to have done just fine.
Like, seriously, you know? I mean, all I take from it is that it felt like the whole thing was just a big apology and them trying to wrap up as much as they could in, 2 hours and 30 minutes without having a really extended thing. I would watch an extended cut of that because I'd really like to see what was going on with it. Sure. I didn't feel like they were taking me for granted like I thought the Game of Thrones people did. I just think, though, with all the story that is out there, now I've already dumped on the expanded universe before, but there are some good bits in there. And obviously a lot of that have made their way into The Mandalorian and Star Wars Rebels. We've had Star Wars Rebels, we had the Clone Wars, Star Wars Legends, that Dark Horse series that was done back in the day, the comic books. I remember reading those, written by John Ostrander. He used to do Suicide Squad and all that stuff. And it was awesome, dealing with these other Jedi and, trying to avoid Vader when he's trying to crack down on them and purge them and everything. And I loved it. Of all that amazing Star Wars story and the brain trust that's involved with all that. And that's what I got. Unimpressed, man. Just unimpressed.
Okay. Well, I will say I do remember that when Episode 8 was about to come out, I think I read a story where JJ said after he saw the story treatment for 8, he wished he was directing. So, he apparently knew something was going on. Well, I have a feeling that there's not going to be a whole lot of disagreement as to how we thought The Mandalorian ended with its kind of 2-part finale. And let's just start with that. The fact that, one of the things that we had pretty much gotten up to the point before we started reaching the last couple episodes was a beginning, middle, and an end. There were no cliffhangers. And holy crap, did they smack us in the face with a cliffhanger in that episode before the finale, seeing the Imperials not only get Baby Yoda or the child, but also the tough death of Nick Nolte's character. That was, man, and that's the last visual you got as that thing ended.
No, the chase, it's just the way they filmed it and the way they were drawing it out, but not in a way that was tedious or anything. It kept building tension. And I honestly thought that my heart was going to burst out of my chest because you're just like, oh my God, because you see him getting closer to the ship. Like you genuinely think he's going to make it. And then he doesn't. And then it rolls credits and you're just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How could you do this?
I loved it. I thought that whole 2-part thing was just magnificent. It was the tone I wanted. And even though, some of those bits were going to, the pacing is a little, and the story, though, it's a little bit predictable. I thought it was fantastic. It kind of had that Magnificent Seven sort of vibe to it, going the gunslinger and his allies going back into town to kind of clear out the bad guys and that sort of thing. And that's been a trope that I've just really enjoyed about this whole show. But oh man, no complaints here at all. As a whole, just fantastic. Just adored it.
One of the things that got some of the most talk, and we brought this up earlier in the finale, was now the scouts have Baby Yoda. They have the child, and they don't bring him into town right away, and so they just have to kind of sit there and hang out. Come to find out, these 2 scouts are voiced by Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally. I mean, it was so funny to watch the reviews or the reactions on Twitter. Everybody was saying, okay, these two need their own series, her own backstory series. And everybody was talking about what it was like to see, him punch poor little baby Yoda or the child
so
multiple
funny.
times and just say, shut up. And then, of course, the great thing, which we referenced earlier, was when they're just trying to do a little target practice and they're missing every single shot.
Every single shot
was brilliant. That's one of those moments where you're definitely getting a little bit of fan service there, but it works for the story too.
It does, because they were sort of hashing out some of the bureaucratic nonsense that stormtroopers would have to deal with at the same time, just sort of trying to get clearance and all of this stuff, and how everything is just a little bit clunky. It takes a long time, because, the Empire isn't really a well-oiled machine anymore.
Right.
And so them just trying to get this asset from point A to point B and them missing every shot at target practice was just sort of a perfect view into, like, stormtrooper downtime.
It was something that Robot Chicken could have easily done too.
Oh, God, yes. Oh, my gosh.
Did you ever see that? Gosh, it was like in the first days when I first had the internet. I think it came out about 20 years ago now, that short mockumentary thing called Troops.
Yes.
Yeah, it very much reminded me of that. It's like the Imperial Stormtroopers just hanging out in the Dune Sea patrolling, and it's like Cops. So it's done just like Cops with the bad boys thing. But it's the Stormtroopers, and they're just hanging out and just chewing the fat and kind of, bitching at Jawas and stuff like that. They go to investigate, was it a domestic disturbance,
yes.
I think. And this lady's like going off about how her husband Lars is being a bit mental, and then they turn to the camera and they're talking. The next thing you know, she's gone and done something, and poor Uncle Lars and Aunt Beru get shot, and they're like, "Oh, what are we gonna do? Oh, just torch the place, make it look like Tuscans. It's cool, just cover it up." And it very much reminded me of that sort of banter. It was so much fun. I love that bit. And you know what? The thing I liked about that as well is that for how heavy the first bit had been, and something which, I think the episode 9 had was stakes. In this, we had stakes. We knew what was happening. We knew how serious it was. We knew the gravity of the situation, and that there was no sort of forced magic stuff that was really going to bail them out of it. It was one man, a droid, Cara Dune. They're going to go in there, and they're gonna try and clean out that town and try and get safe passage off to to secure the child in future. Just that kind of that little scene, just to like kind of spill the tension, but it still laid so much story down about it. Says how they go when they come down. They like to lay the law down. Go a bit heavy. That's just how it is. Like, it's just typical that some moth comes down and starts massacring like a battalion of soldiers just because they get in the way. Because this is the way I do things here, and I'm kind of, I'm pretty hard. Pick up your bootstraps, and it's like, the Empire. What you gonna do?
Exactly.
So
and when he
good
was
to me.
on the walkie, and he was like, "Oh, and he just shot the officer for asking, so we probably shouldn't ask him again." And he said it like that wasn't a big deal. Like, that's probably something they deal with every single day.
Such a fan of that. It was a lot of fun. Hey, I said,
and they did it
Uncle
right.
Lars, I mean, Uncle Owen, before I get like shot for like not knowing my Star Wars bona fides. I meant Uncle Owen. Yeah, cool. Right.
Owen and Beru.
There you go. Absolutely.
We also saw a lot of things happen with the Mandalorian too. Everything from getting pretty much it seemed to be mortally wounded. And then that moment where, oh my gosh, how awesome was it when IG-11 came in and just kicked ass.
Dude, I think that is some of the best droid action that I've ever seen in any Star Wars anything. I mean, as soon as he showed up to get Baby Yoda from those guys and was like, "Yep, I'm the nanny," and you're just like, uh-oh, these guys are dead. And then he just straddles that speeder and just comes going into town because he's like, "I nurse and protect," and then just starts going. And it's just the coolest sequence I've ever seen that's droid related.
It was great. I mean, it's almost like the equivalent of the scene I was talking about. That's my favorite from Return of the Jedi, because it was a moment where it looked like, holy crap, they're screwed. They have everybody cornered in a room. Baby Yoda is in the possession of these two guys that are off site. How do they get out of this? Well, IG-11 smacks some people around, then hops on a speeder and starts taking everybody out and leaves the door open. So that was an awesome scene. And then IG-11 is also the reason why we actually see the Mandalorian show his face on camera for the first time, which was a really interesting moment because he said, I'm not allowed to let, any human being see this or any living thing see this. He goes, well, I'm not a living thing. So that was kind of a cool moment. And then, of course, at the end, we see him get his jetpack, which was also pretty cool.
I'm actually really, really pleased with the way they did the helmet removal and incorporating IG-11 into that, because I wanted to see his helmet come off, but I didn't want to see it come off in a way that he could never put it back on again.
Right.
Which is basically what he said. I was like, well, I don't want helmetless Mandalorian for the rest of the show.
Yes.
Here they found the perfect loophole for it where they can pop it off, show us how handsome Pedro Pascal is, show him he's a real person, and then put it back on and we can get Mandalorian back. I think it was absolutely genius the way they did it.
Yeah, I was glad to see him because sometimes you do wonder if he's actually under there. And I believe there's actually one episode where he was, I want to say, was he like doing production for like Wonder Woman or something? And it wasn't him under there, under the helmet. It was his stunt double fighting with Gina Carano in that first episode. Whenever they take down the Skywalker, the AT-ST, he wasn't actually in that at all. He was unavailable, and all the lines were just dubbed over in post-production. So it was nice to actually see the star of the show.
Yeah.
In the show. But yeah, to echo your point about IG-11, definitely the standout for me on that show. That particular episode, although I did get this feeling that whenever, the armorer gives him his, his new add-ons and all the rest of it, that it's kind of like, when, I don't know if I'm dating myself here, when you play Metroid or Super Metroid and you're playing and Samus gets the extra power and now he gets to do more he gets to do more cool stuff. I felt like that. I was like, oh man, more adventures, more cool stuff. And, even though I was a bit critical to begin with, like that first, was it episode 2 or 3 when he got the whispering birds and, I'll let you use the whispering birds. When he got more the gadget and the sigil this time around, I was like, yes! I was excited. I want to see how he's going to use it. I was really, really jazzed for it because that show just made me believe her. The tone was very consistent and a big finish at the end. And just had me wanting more. I'm so excited and so jazzed for that show. I loved it. And the fact that it did IG-11 so well, if they have more droids up there in the future, like Forlom or like, or other bounty hunters, you had like Zuckuss and people like that, I just want to see that because I'm a believer they do it so well.
Apparently they've already teased that there's going to be some familiar characters in season 2.
I'm excited.
So that'll be interesting to see which one of those we get. I wouldn't be surprised if it might be a couple of those bounty hunters we saw in Empire. And yeah, it was also equally as tough after such heroics to see IG-11 have to sacrifice himself, but he did it in epic fashion. He finally got to self-destruct. He talked about it so much. He finally got to do it. He finally got to do it and do it for a good reason. Finally, my thing is, I think Moff Gideon was perfectly cast.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, did you immediately notice Darksaber when that first thing came out? I was like, holy crap.
Oh, screamed, it's black!
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't wait to get on social media and watch people lose their minds after seeing Darksaber pop up at the end of that episode.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
And just sets up the season 2 a little bit because there's going to be more conflict there because that's so important to the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
Whether they were trying to duck Moff Gideon or not, now they have to come into conflict with him because they need that back.
Right.
That's just a vital part of their creed. So yeah, just what a show. Just so impressed by that.
And all the things that over the course of the show, and then the things that they sort of summarized in the finale, everything we've learned about what it is to be a Mandalorian and how they're not a race, it's a creed. Right. It's all just some of the coolest stuff that I'm so glad, because I remember one of the reasons I was excited about this show is because we knew nothing of Mandalorians really. And the things that they've presented us with were just magnificent. And seeing him, whenever they were sort of going through that underground area, seeing him come upon the Mandalorian armor of all of his, fallen comrades from that fight earlier in the season, and just sort of seeing the armorer take care of it and his final conversation with her. That's just absolutely everything I wanted in what a Mandalorian is. And it was just a pleasure to watch.
This is any indication of what we're going to get out of the Obi-Wan series or the Cassian series.
Gosh, yes.
There's going to be some pretty great Star Wars stuff on Disney Plus, that's for sure.
100%.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast. Remember that we are on Twitter at Disney Plus Cast, and we're also at DisneyPlusStreamcast.com, where you can stream or download any episode of the show. And of course, if you listen on a particular podcast platform, you can subscribe there. The other thing you can do on the website is if you want to email your thoughts on anything we discussed today, feel free to do that. And we will be back next week with a new episode of the show that will focus on some Disney classics. So please join us for that, and thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast.
The entertainment, adventure, and magic on Disney Plus never stops. So join us for the next episode of the Disney Plus Streamcast. You can subscribe to the show on podcast providers like iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Search, stream, or download any episode on our website. While you're there, get news updates, watch videos, follow us on social media, and check out the Streamcast Spotlight. Just go to DisneyPlusStreamcast.com. Thank you for listening.